Women of Reddit, what was the smoothest way you were asked out? We met at college. We started hanging out after some friends introduced us and he told me about Damned. I'd never played, so he said he would teach me the rules. One night after we'd been hanging out for a few weeks, we started talking about relationships, as in past relationships. He told me about some ex-girlfriends, just briefly. I dated her for 6 months. Then her for 2 years type stuff. Then he asked me about my past relationships. Okay. So my backstory at that point was 0. 0 boyfriends. 0 guys kissed. No one had really seemed interested, and to be honest I was pretty insecure about it. To add to that, I had been on my first date ever about a month before I met him, and the guy bailed when he found out I'd never been kissed. But I wasn't the type to lie, so I told him. His response was a thoughtful HMMMM, and then he leaned forward and kissed me. Then he said, "There. Problem solved. We've been together 15 years. Married 13 years and have 4 kids, and he's still the only guy I've ever kissed." Summer of sophomore year. There was an ice cream store I would go to religiously every other day. They had a huge selection of flavors that rotated frequently. And the guy that worked there could predict what I'd order because it'd always have to be whatever's new. It got to the point where I didn't even have to order. I'd just walk in and he'd have a cone ready for me by the time I reached the register. But we never really talked outside of ice cream orders. Finally, one day he says, "You really like ice cream?" Me, haha, yeah. I do. Him, "Do you also like pizza and a movie?" Maybe, Saturday? Me, "Actually, my friend Naomi and I are going." Friend elbows me hard and conspicuously, "Not going anywhere. See you Sat?" Him, "Cool. I'll see you here. Usual time." Then he gave my friend double scoop on the house. Him, "Bubble tea is gross." Me, "Ugh, bubble tea is the worst." Him, "We should go out for bubble tea. And not order bubble tea." Us, together for 4 years. He literally ran after me. We had a class together and started talking about 2 weeks before it ended. I thought he was cute as hell, but didn't think he felt the same way. He and his buddy lived the same way I did, and on the last day of class, they walked home with me but split paths after a few blocks. So I'm walking and kinda gushing to a friend via text about him, and I hear someone running and it's him. He tells me that he'd be a massive idiot unless he gets my phone number because he thinks I'm super cute. We've been together for 3 years. I was bartending. A customer I had a few good conversations with asked me what time my shift ended. And I told him 2 AM. He leaned back and said, "Can I order a coffee? I'm going to need it if I want to stay up until 2 AM. Note, I don't want to be harsh, but bartenders are paid to be nice to you. Be 105% sure someone's into you before you pull a move like this." Yeah, I was always told not to hit on service people, they are just doing their job. Except bouncers. I love being hit on. When I was living in Boston, there was a really cute guy who would play his guitar and sing in the stations along the Blue Line. I always gave him a few bucks because he was really cute. And B, he was really talented. He'd smile and call me the girl with the yellow roses. I have tattoos of yellow roses on my back. And then I'd get on the train and be gone. I was, still am, actually, in a long-term relationship, but I figured it was just harmless flirting. After about a month and a half of this, I walked into one of the stations. I could hear someone playing ukulele. And then I heard, "Hey, girl with the yellow roses." So I looked around and saw him sitting on the bench with a bouquet of yellow roses. And he started playing My Girl by The Temptations on the uke. When he was done, I walked over and he asked me out for coffee. It was so ducking cute, albeit a little embarrassing because crowded station, and if I had been single I would have said yes. But I didn't. He smiled and said, "That figures. Have a great day. Pretty girl." In grade 8, a guy friend of mine came to my door with a plastic watering can. He opened with, "John told me that you have to make it memorable when you ask someone out. So I brought you a watering can." Super cute. I definitely will always remember. I said yes. We dated for 2 weeks and then both concluded we are better as friends. But it was still the best way I've ever been asked out. You were the tall brunette with the near perfect body that farted in the Trader Joe's bread section last night. I was the tall guy next to you that looked over and asked, "Was that you?" You quickly replied, "No. Wasn't me." You almost seemed insulted I would ask. As the stink grew, you continued to deny your flatulence. But it was evident. I tried to get rid of the stench by waving to loaves of ciabatta bread. You proceeded to storm off in an angry manner. You are beautiful even if you are a liar and fart like a Clydesdale. I'd love to meet up sometime. Some guy from Craigslist. One Saturday morning there was a knock on my door. I opened it and there was a young guy my age with a construction vest in. He stared at me for a couple seconds and I said, "Can I help you?" "Hello. We are doing some work on the pipes on this street." He was basically telling me I couldn't flush the toilet for a couple hours while they did the work. A couple hours later, they were done and gone. I had to run some errands so I went to leave. Stuck in the door was a note asking me out. It was signed "The guy who told you not to flush." Maybe not the smoothest, but one of the cutest ways I have been asked out. He came into my chocolate shop every day for a week on his break. He worked at the shop next to mine, and we had fun random conversations about life. On Friday, he came in looking a bit disheveled and I was genuinely concerned. Asked him if everything was okay. He looked at me with the most vulnerable eyes and said, "Would you please let me take you on a date tonight?" It was so upfront and honest. He wasn't trying to conceal any emotions or hidden agendas. He gained massive points in my book for that one. I was at a party with a friend of mine when this guy comes over with a deck of cards. He insisted on showing my friend his party trick and proceeded to have her choose a card at random. She grabbed the card and kept its identity to herself and he placed it back in the deck and shuffled it. He started laying down cards and ended when he reached 10. He looked up at her and said, "Do you notice anything interesting about these cards I lay down?" She shook her head and he then looks her directly in the eyes and says, "It's my number. Call me." He then proceeded to give her an over-exaggerated wink, shot her some finger gums, and disappeared into the crowd of the party. I met a guy when I was like 16 at a convention. We happened to be in the same area and really hit it off talking about art and drawing. We started doodling each other while still chatting away, and exchanged portraits when it came time to part ways. He signed his drawing of me with his phone number. For two nerds at an cosplay convention. That was pretty damn smooth. Edit. In retrospect, doodling was probably not the best word to describe what we were doing. Not asked out, but was on Skype with a friend playing Truth or Dare. He picked Dare and I said to call his crush and say he liked them. He then put me on hold. Called me again. Said I like you and went back to the first call. "Hey. Would you like to get a drink sometime?" That quiet confidence is smooth. And the lack of pressure made the whole thing that much more enjoyable. At a party in college on a roof, a boy jumped down from a higher portion right next to me and said, "You're the most beautiful girl at this party. Can I have a cigarette?" And we were together for 2 years. But I think the best part was in the middle of our first date. He said, "Can I just get this out of the way?" And then bam. He kissed me. I found out later it was an Annie Hall reference. And he asked me out because he has a fetish for a certain type of nipple and could tell by looking at me I had that type. What a weird 2 years. I had just met this guy at a friend's party and we instantly hit it off. I was telling him how I have a really bad relationship with coffee because it gives me the sheets. At the end of the night he said, "I'm facing a dilemma here because I really want to ask you out but you can't drink coffee and you're not old enough to get a beer. So like, tea? Would you like to go out for tea?" Relationship didn't last long, but granted it was the sweetest way I was asked out. I was at a party with this really cute guy that I had been talking to for a bit. I didn't really know anyone there though, so I wanted to go home. and his friend was way too drunk, so he ended up giving us both a ride home. Anyway, he dropped me off first, which I was kind of bummed about because I was planning on making a move once his friend left, but I assumed he did it on purpose and wasn't into me. Not 10 minutes later I get a call to come downstairs as I'd left something in his car and he wanted to give it back to me. I get downstairs and ask what it was and he just put his hands on my face and pulled me in for a kiss. He asked me out, but I had basically melted at that point and I think I just nodded and grinned like a fool. Definitely the smoothest thing a guy has done. At university, my guy friend saw that I was having a bad day in one of our morning classes. He came and sat down next to me and said, "You look like you could use a pick-me-up. How about I pick you up at 7 inches?" He escaped the friend zone that night and we ended up dating for a year. Edit. Sorry I posted this on break and forget a few words in my haste. Day 4. Not a girl, but proud of myself for this one. This one time in university I had a crush on a girl. We were friends, acquaintances, and photography was one of my hobbies. She asked to go on a photo excursion, so we walked around and took photos. And I snapped a few of her doing some funny poses. I had the photos printed and gave the ones of her to her. But on one particular one I wrote on the back that I thought she was cute and that she ought to let me take her on a date. She said no. Oh well. We were friends for a couple months and one day he invites me over to watch a movie and have some lunch. Right before I was about to go home he says, "Wait. I have something for you." He comes out of his room with a book I'd been wanting to get but couldn't find it in any store and he says, "This book has a lot of chapters to it and I was hoping we could also start a new chapter together. Will you be my girlfriend?" And that is the story of how I got my first boyfriend. Lasted 2 years but it was a good run. You should put my number in your phone. My boyfriend of 2 years. There was just something so cute about his momentary confident remark. Plus I stared at him for a good 2 minutes before I agreed while he looked around nervously. When I met my husband, we were at a local bar. I was already friends with him on Facebook. He added me after we had talked on a mutual friend status, but we had never actually seen each other. I was terrified to approach him, so I kept hiding. Finally, after a few beers, I struck up a conversation. We ended up dancing all night. After I said goodbye he messaged me on Facebook and said, "Hey, you forgot to give me your number." I thought that was pretty smooth. We went out 2 days later and have been together ever since. I commute to college and since it's a fixed schedule, I end up seeing the same group of people on the train. So once, this one guy came up to me and said, "Hi, my name is Steven. I've seen you on the train a lot and just want to say I think you're gorgeous." It was pretty sweet. We're good friends now. I work at a custom-made printing plate company. You give us a digital file and we make a plate you can run through a printing press. Normally all I do is check out, scrutinize the artwork very carefully to make sure it'll make a good printing plate. We often have to tell customers that some art is too delicate to appear on the plate correctly and they fix their files. A regular of ours, good customer that always comes in to pick up his plates and will chit chat about life and the whatnot, calls in early that there's an order coming in that he really needs accurate and ready by end of day that day. No biggie, and I mark his account so that I'm assigned to handle review his next order. Day goes by and I forget that I'm assigned to it till it pops in last minute. I review it over very microscopically and realize that the last chunk of artwork was a message that said, "OP. Can I take you out to dinner when I pick up my plates?" in a font that clearly can't plate well, which means I have to call him to get the file fixed. By far the smoothest, sneakiest way I've been asked out. When I was in college I worked part-time at this coffee shop cafe. It was kind of like a mix of Starbucks and Panera but wasn't really as good as either. So one day I was at the register taking orders when a guy around my age comes up. I asked him, "What can I get you?" And he replied, "Your phone number, please." It was cheesy, and in the heat of the moment I'm afraid that I replied with something just as cheesy because I said, "I'm sorry. That's not on the menu, dart." So he wasn't really him asking me out. But before we started dating, Miso and I had been texting the whole summer and I was perpetually busy until the last day before I moved back to college. I had a free evening. I texted him saying how I didn't have any plans Friday, which he responded as cool or nice. Since he missed the cue, I asked, would you like to change that? He immediately got the hint and we planned an adventure. I think that was the smoothest I've ever been when confronting a guy. Though when he came to pick me up, he held the car door open for me. And I knew I was in trouble. A few years ago I was chatting with some guy in a bar. I was a little buzzed. Definitely not drunk. Anyway. He says, would you like to go for lunch sometime? I'd love to talk to you while we're both sober. I was quite surprised. He wanted to have a genuine conversation and get to know me. It was the first time I gave my number out at a bar. A guy sent me a Facebook message asking if I would be able to answer a few questions for a survey. I said sure. And the first question was asking for my number. I'd already said yes before he asked. So I obliged. On our first date, he said he hated black people at an all-you-can-eat Mongolian grill. 0/10 would not go again.